With the limited biochemical foundation that you have learned so far, I will try to make it simpler for you to understand the two very important processes that are very important to the world of plants and to the world of animals. The first process is the energy releasing process, which is called as respiration. So the respiration, the term, is not just about breathing in and breathing out oxygen, breathing in oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. This is an energy releasing process, and it is based on the breakdown of the food particles. The food particles that we ate, whether it's us humans or whether it's animals, the energy that is stored in the food particles are eventually broken down into a very simple molecule, which is glucose. Glucose then releases tremendous amount of energy through a series of reactions, and this energy that is released is eventually trapped in the form of ATP, which is then used for the various reactions that our body or any organism's cells undergo. So keep in mind, all organisms, including the photoautotrophs, which would be plants that will manufacture their own energy through the process of photosynthesis, and the heterotrophs, which would be organisms such as animals that depend on these. Both of these organisms will eventually break down the food or the energy that they have consumed into the molecule, which is glucose. Glucose is a molecule that stores a tremendous amount of chemical energy in it. And if this molecule was to break down in just one single step, then the excessive energy would be wasted. So nature has designed this very complicated process, as you will discover, and this process also gives us an insight about the relationship between our primitive ancestors and their modern day descendants. And this will be demonstrated through the connections that you will see throughout the course of time. Now, the energy that is stored after the release of glucose is in the molecule of ATP, which, if you remember, is adenosine triphosphate. I did go over the terminology of this molecule in the previous chapter too. Now, the pathway of this breakdown will take place in the region that is pointed over in all these three pictures, and that region is the cytoplasm. If you recall, cytoplasm is the region which is the fluid part within it, which is, if you remember, I said earlier, the floor of the room, or the cytosol, which is the liquid part. Within that region of the cell, the process of breakdown of glucose will start. Now, whether it's a bacterial cell, as pointed in this lower picture, whether this is a plant cell, or whether it's the animal cell, in all of these cells, the process will begin at the same region. And the process will break down glucose, which is a 6-carbon compound, into pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon compound. So you can see, if you have one of the 6-carbon compounds and I break it into 3-carbon compounds, I must have 2 of these molecules. This new molecule is the pyruvate. Now, this reaction is a very complex reaction, and there are actually 11 steps to the reaction. We're not going to go into all the depth. I'll try to make it simpler so you can understand the basic sense of respiration. If after the breakdown into pyruvate, there are 2 modes of that the pathway can take. And we will see what it depends on and what forces each pathway. One pathway is called as fermentation pathway, which also ends within the cytoplasm, and it yields 2 ATP per molecule of glucose. However, if conditions are right and the pathway is taken in which mitochondria are involved, if you recall, mitochondria, we called that previously as the powerhouse of the cell. It's the organelle in which energy will be released. So if the conditions are right and pyruvate enters mitochondria, that yields 36 ATP per glucose molecule. So you can see the difference, 2 versus 36, that this definitely is a more beneficial process to release the same amount of energy that is released from glucose. You might be wondering that maybe perhaps all the energy could be released in the fermentation pathway. What happens is you only get a small amount of energy, that is 2 ATP, and the rest of the energy is wasted and just not used. It's sort of like a stagnant step. Now, the very important condition that will make a choice between which pathway to end up with is the presence of or absence of oxygen. If oxygen is present, then pyruvate will enter the aerobic pathway. If oxygen, however, is not present, the pathway will be the fermentation pathway. So, keeping in mind the aerobic respiration, which, keep in mind, this is the one in which oxygen must be present. So if the oxygen is present, pyruvate will take this step. Now the first step involved in respiration is called as glycolysis. The first step is the same step that was mentioned over here. So pretty much the first step is the breakdown of glucose to pyruvate. The second step is when pyruvate enters a cyclic pathway. So this would be a cyclic pathway, and there are certain products that are released during this pathway, and these then enter the third pathway, which is called as the electron transfer chain, or sometimes also called as electron transfer phosphorylation. But if you call it as ETC, which C stands for the word chain, this is correct. Now, in this image over here, you can see that glucose is a molecule that's shown over here. Now, glucose has a tremendous amount of energy, and this energy is shown in the form of these coins that are being collected at different steps of the process. The first pathway is glycolysis, which is very close to the glucose molecule, results in a small amount of energy. From here onwards, there are two pathways that the molecule can take. If it does take up the Krebs cycle pathway, then it eventually will end up in this electron transfer chain, and you can see these currency chains that are shown on this image, that how many coins seem to be stacked. If you can remember that more currency is involved in aerobic respiration than the other one, which is called as the anaerobic. Anaerobic implies without oxygen. So fermentation is the anaerobic, aerobic pathway. Very important key words. The summary of this entire reaction is this in one simple line, which states that the first molecule, which is glucose, combines with oxygen to yield carbon dioxide and water. Now let's look into a little bit more depth of glucose as what causes the glucose molecule to split apart. Just like if you were to mow your lawn or run a trimmer of any kind of work, sometimes you need a little bit of primer. That primer is an energy molecule. It's something that will trigger the reaction, a series of reaction. In the case of glucose, for glucose to start this entire pathway of rolling, it needs 2 ATPs to begin the reaction. These two molecules of ATP are like your primers. It primes the reaction. Once glucose is split, it results at the end 2 molecules of 3 carbon pyruvate. Remember, this was a 6 carbon molecule. So the pyruvate would be each 3 carbons. You must have 2 of these. Now, well, at the end of this reaction, 4 ATPs are released. Now, if you recall, if we started this reaction with 2 ATPs and I asked you what is the net gain, you can see very easily the net gain is only 2 ATPs because you used 2 to begin with. Besides that, you get something which is called as a molecule that's shown over here. These molecules are electron carriers. The large name of this word is nicotine adenine dinucleotide hydrogen. But I really would not expect you to remember all that. All I would ask you to remember is that in the series of 11 steps, remember that electrons are being given out, and these electrons are passed on through the hydrogen atoms to a molecule which is an electron carrier. So if you just call this as an electron carrier, I'll be okay with that. Now, at the end of glycolysis, let me recall back. We got the pyruvate, we got the ATP, and we got this electron carrier from the previous steps. Now, there are 2 possibilities of the fate of pyruvate. The first fate is either fermentation or it could be the Krebs cycle. I hope you remember what was the reason that would force pyruvate to enter one or the other. The presence or absence of oxygen. If oxygen is present in the environment, it will enter the aerobic pathway. However, if no oxygen, then it will enter the fermentation pathways. Now, in this particular image over here, you can see glycolysis is shown over here, and then you can see all these little balls are showing you the number of carbons, and it's a very complicated process, 10 steps to it.